So a very basic form of inquiry that I often talk about in different ways is this, okay? So recognize that which is prior to any thought and ask yourself, what is it? What is it that all of this is? What is it that I am? What is the nature of my experience prior to having any thought about it? So usually when you ask this question, there's a small gap that seems to appear. It's just like a little bit of like a brightening or clearing, you know, or just spaciousness or openness. Can even feel like a just small cessation. And then the mind is starting to kind of look for the answer. So you can kind of recognize that some sort of movement seems to happen, that it's trying to, you know, find that. What is it that all of this is prior to having a thought? So when you notice that movement of the mind, you just then bring yourself back to that question, that inquiry. And notice that that which is prior to any thought, any image, any kind of thought process, no matter how subtle, so that which is prior to it, it's in no way separate from it. So it's not some sort of background state. It's not some sort of distant position of watching the thought. Because if you really feel into it, that type of sense of a perceiver or witnessing, it's actually just another form of thought, okay? So you really kind of want to recognize these subtle forms of thought that are not just words, that are not just narratives, but are more like vague impressions and representations of what you are or what everything is. So whenever you ask this question, you want to see through these type of mental representations, no matter how subtle and vague, and be very clear about, like, what is it that is not a thought, that is not an impression. So this inquiry should take you, if it works, it should take you to a place of non-conceptuality, okay? And that can then be experienced in various different ways. It can be felt like, you know, just silence or stillness, or just a subtle sense of aliveness. Can be felt as presence, but these are all just words. So even when you then start to experience something like, this is just being, this is just being, prior to any thought, then you want to ask yourself, well, what is the nature of that being prior to any kind of thought about it? So you want to keep doing this, you know, so that these subtle views, self-views or views upon reality, they can kind of come into light and dissolve in this immediacy, in this direct immediacy. And you want to recognize that it's not an experience, right? It instantly and spontaneously and naturally transcends any experience. Because that which is prior to thought, it's exactly the same whether you are having the most sublime insight into the nature of reality or you're having a contracted and painful, emotionally or even physically, painful experience. So whenever you are having any kind of experience, if you just tap into what's the nature of this experiencing prior to having any thought about it, it's very interesting because it instantly gives you a direct taste of that immediacy, which is completely transcendent of the nature of the experience, and yet it is inseparable from the experiencing in itself. It's actually indivisible. So the experiencing is this immediacy. And when this is recognized in an experiential manner and it stabilizes so that it naturally becomes a kind of baseline of where you kind of hang out, so to speak, it just naturally, you could say, the locus of your, it's not even attention. You could say that that's where you abide, but even this way of speaking is misleading because there's no one abiding there and nothing that could abide there. So this idea that you or some sort of presence or awareness could anchor itself into the direct experience, that in itself is a dualistic experience. The direct experience is itself presence, is itself awareness. So this phenomenal flow is in no way anything other than awareness. So that's kind of the fundamental split that we imagine that is there, and it can be easy to overlook this. So when we tap into the immediacy, it can be easy then when we sense that there is this cognizant nature to, just this presence in itself, that's undeniable. Then there can be the tendency to kind of reify the presence as something existing on its own. And then there's, everything else, right? Thoughts, sensations, even world. And that's fine, that's of course it can be liberating to know that you can access this type of presence within yourself, right? And kind of relate to the phenomena from that place, to the internal phenomena, to the external phenomena. But this is a form of dualistic perception. So this is not non-duality. So there's further to go, quite a bit further to go actually, even though the further is never going anywhere other, than what is already occurring. So what needs to happen here is that all this subtle self-use and usable reality needs to be seen through. Okay, so well, what's the nature of the presence? Like, if you really feel into it, it clearly doesn't have any boundaries, right? It doesn't have any locatable center. So if you still experience something like external world or other people, like as something, fundamentally other, than presence, your own immediate presence, then just ask yourself, well, where is that boundary? Where is the boundary between apparent self as presence and something that is not self, something that is other? And it's quite quickly obvious that there is no such boundary to most people, and yet they keep feeling that the presence is something interior, and there is still a world out there. So this is the second phase of this investigation, is then to start to very in a focused way, in a focused but very relaxed way. And I also want to say in a carefree way. Okay, you really want to have this lightness of exploration, curiosity, that type of innocent quality to it. But at the same time, you want to find this focus. Okay, so that it really starts to become this question that is kind of asking itself all the time. So it's not just something you think about, once in a day. And this is not actually something you think about. The inquiry is not really a thinking process, even though thought can be used as a tool, in inquiry. The inquiry is really this fundamental impulse, it arises within. So it has to be genuine like that. You really have to discover that in your own being, that impulse or instinct of enlightenment, or if maybe, in order not to mythologize it and make it something, that the mind doesn't start to imagine weird things about it. We can also just call it this instinct of reality to know itself directly. So recognize that, and from that place, just look and feel. So when you look, you don't really look with your physical eyes, and you also don't really look from this position of witness, this idea that you're somewhere located here and looking into the phenomena. So look me here means this intimacy with the experience is inseparable from feeling into the experience. So you start to look and feel into the boundary of self and other, and when you don't find it, you keep looking, and you keep looking, and you keep looking, and you relax. Okay, you relax so thoroughly that you really discover this effortless alertness and attention and kind of openness that is attuning with itself like that. And at the same time, there is this focus which starts to create this subtle tension, okay, in a beneficial manner. So something starts to build up there. So that's a great place to be when you start to feel this kind of happening in your process. So the next insight into the immediacy is this well, that you suddenly see that there is only this, you know, like wherever you look or whatever you sense, whatever you hear, it's nothing other. It's nothing other than the presence. It's literally presence shining, presence as sensations, presence as sounds, presence as thoughts. So it's not presence of sensations. It's not presence, you know, or awareness of thoughts. It's awareness, presence as thought, as appearance. And there's only appearance, and the appearance is by its nature awareness. It's presence. It's just presence experiencing itself. And it's seamlessly. So there's not a sense of unification there. It's just that this fundamental distortion of self and other releases. You know, it kind of like unbinds itself, this misperception. And that can be then felt with your whole body. You know, it's really not a mental thing. When it's being talked about, it sounds very much like, you know, consciousness can sound very mental, but when it is being seen, realized, recognized, it's like the whole of reality awakens to itself, recognizes itself. That's how it feels like. And you look around and everything is that. Everything is awake. Everything is presence. Everything is consciousness. Mm-hmm. So this fundamental dream of separation can be seen for what it is, okay? So when it dissolves, it drops away, and there is just this undivided wholeness of what is, you know, arising, appearing, dissolving, arising, dissolving constantly. And at the same time, there's no arising, there's no dissolving. It just is. But even that's not really the case. So you can't really say anything about it. It's just so interesting. Okay, so the word starts to really become very, very shallow compared to this. Okay. So for a while it can really feel like that